I'm here with Jay Frankel, who is an expert in group dynamics and coaching people and mentoring people. And he just does work all over. And I want to start with him asking Jay, please tell me what you do. What is your career about right now? What's the core?
Thank you, Stephen. So hi, everyone. My name is Jay. I am the founder and president of a company called True to Life Training. We're now in our 21st year. What we really specialize in are two things. One is we develop interpersonal skills. So we help people in actually quite unique ways increase the quality of the interactions that they're having with people that they work with, work for, and engage with. We often will help develop their life skills too because of that. So we often get people thanking us for saving their marriage. That is not our intent. But because we help them so much on their interpersonal side, they become more skilled in navigating conflict and managing people, supervising others, leadership. The other part to our organization is I do a lot of consulting, especially in the startup world, and in particular in the summer camp industry, which I sort of just fell into. And so in the last 12 years, I've been a part of the launch of 18 overnight summer camps for children. And when I was in the corporate world prior to that, I launched a new product, a new division of Viacom. And I also, before that, launched new business for Gap when I was with Gap at the very beginning of my career, and that was in France.
So tell me something. It's fascinating, this whole notion of the moment of interaction between people. Like what makes that special, those relationships? We'll talk about mentorship in a minute, but that the relationship between two people who are trying to connect to each other and provide value. What's happening at that moment?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the keys to that moment of interaction is most people focus on what they're putting out, the words that they are saying, and the truth is, it is so much more about the body language and the tone of authenticity and sincerity. People really don't listen to the words nearly as much as we might think. So where everyone is harping on, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? I don't care nearly as much what you say. I care so much more about what it is you're putting out there. And that's where people are getting the meaning from. So listening becomes, and observing becomes so much more important to that first interaction than anything else. And by the way, Stephen, that's true with mentorship too. That's not just true with any interaction, but mentorship in particular. You have to come in ready to observe and listen to not just the words, to what's behind the words.
And how do you prepare for something like that? I mean, I know a lot of people speak and they write scripts and they do outlines. How do you prepare for that interaction and to provide value on both sides of the fence?
Are you talking about me and my work, or anyone?
And anyone, you're about to enter a conversation, whether it's in person or virtual. And how do you prepare for that from the things that are not what we expect, which is what I'm about to say?
Sure. I think, one, you have to come into a conversation open-minded enough so that you are prepared to actually care about someone's point of view. Because if you're only in the interaction to express your point of view, you will miss, well, at least 50% of the purpose of that conversation, possibly more, because your point of view may not, the give and take of actually engaging with someone and caring about what it is they have to say or what it is that they do, that is going to get you way further than if you're really coming in and just focused on you and your thoughts. Sales are very similar to that. The folks who can sell the best are the ones who really care and listen the best, as opposed to just talking up a storm.
Sales is really interesting. All entrepreneurs have to sell. And the first thing what they say when you say, what do you really need? And again, we'll get to mentorship in the middle. And I really need a salesperson and a coder. Like, but salespeople, I always think that, well, you'll be your best salesperson, just learn how to do it. Like, how can you, they all have to sell no matter what. Any
Yes.
advice for them in terms of how they present themselves? What would you say to someone who's starting a company and has to sell their idea and their concept, raise money, whatever it is?
Yeah, look, for the basics, you always need the basics. You've got to be able to, in a very short period of time, a minute or so, be able to explain your narrative, the purpose of your existence, and why this other person or people should care about what it is that your organization does or sells. But beyond those basics, I actually think entrepreneurs don't go in with enough questions. They should come in knowing who they're speaking with so that they have questions that they can ask them. What's in your way right now? You know, how could your life or product or service be better than it is right now? What are your greatest challenges or some of the challenges? The more questions you have, the easier it will be to have an authentic conversation with that person that feels a little bit more in-tuned, a little more relational than transactional, and could much more easily lead to a sale. The idea, the days of the used car salesman are really over.
Yeah.
No one buys into that anymore,
So
if they ever did.
yeah, let's talk about mentorship for a moment. Granted, sometimes, most of the times when we're mentoring entrepreneurs, they tend to be on the young side. The more seasoned people are a little bit older. Like, what is the experience like? How do you establish a relationship with someone who may not be like you, but you want to provide value to them and help them move their venture forward, whether it's in the nonprofit or the for-profit space?
One of the first things I do with new entrepreneurs or folks that I've now been assigned or asked to coach and develop and mentor is I use some form of skill assessment. And what's unique about the skill assessment that I've developed and used is it actually not just goes through and has the person walk me through some of their strengths and areas of improvement and the amount of experience they might have in a particular area, but it actually measures their level of confidence and motivation as it relates to that task. If we're looking into finance, which finance for an entrepreneur and the business savvy that you need to be an entrepreneur, sometimes that's a missing category, right? They need to understand that, but they may not have a whole lot of experience. They might be a creative and they developed something and they're incredibly inspiring, but they don't understand the business side of it. Well, I want to understand where they are with those skills, not just in how well they do them, but are they motivated to do them? Do they have any experience? Do they have bad experiences with this? Where's their level of confidence as it relates to this? How much do they want to do that part? That is a game changer in terms of how I'm able to understand them. And it's a path for me to know, well, they're super motivated here, but here, I know this is sketchy territory. They've had some bad experiences. I need to approach this a little bit more sensitively or just with more awareness.
When you do that kind of assessment, how often do you actually come across people saying, maybe you should just go get a job? It just sounds like when you assess them, like they've got a gap here in resiliency or tenacity or whatever. It's like, maybe you should get a real job.
So it's funny. I tend to do that a little bit more on an interview than I would on someone who I'm assigned to mentor or coach. To me, mentoring and coaching is really a process. So I'm trying in the beginning not to judge where they are right now. They're allowed to be wherever they are. That's okay. My job is to help them get to wherever they eventually need to be. So on an interview, I might think to myself, or maybe I'll even say to someone, this job may not be exactly right. But for mentoring, it's not that. I can't, in fact, I cannot judge them. I often will not react big to anything during that assessment phase. You're kidding. Because to me, anything they tell me is okay. And I might ask more questions, but they are allowed to tell me anything. They have to feel like they can do that safely.
Feel like, how do you predict whether someone actually feels that they can, I guess saying it safely, but just feeling, I always want to know about, is being an entrepreneur or an innovator, is that about feeling that you can do it? Is it a confidence level, or is there something else going on there?
I think skills and confidence are actually extremely connected. If you look at, I don't know if you've ever worked with situational leadership, but Blanchard, and how people develop naturally, and what leadership styles leaders should use to match up to their development level, where their knowledge and skill is and where their motivation and confidence is. It's both. And everyone has different levels depending on the task. And so to me, I think as an entrepreneur, if you don't have the confidence right now in yourself to do this, my hope is that through skill development and experience and trial and error, you're obviously trying to build their confidence. There are some entrepreneurs that come in and they may not know much at all, but they feel like they do, so they have confidence. I know with them, we're probably going to have to take some hits for a little bit to get them leveled off with their level of confidence. I love the confidence. That's good, as long as they're able to listen to feedback and able to make some adjustments to their style or behavior or learning, if that's what's needed to actually get the job done. And sometimes overconfidence can get in the way.
Yeah,
That noise gets in the way of people allowing themselves to do that.
a lot of young people I've worked with, being a college professor, I sense that some of them are so overly confident that you need to sort of ratchet them down a little bit. But how do you do that without cutting them down at the neck or whatever?
There's two things that I find myself doing. And by the way, I have a 22-year-old who just graduated Georgia Tech, who I'm pretty sure is going to be an entrepreneur. And as his dad, I think I probably am too hard on him in terms of getting his confidence in line. I don't think of knocking people down a peg the way maybe some folks might think of it. I know that the journey is what's going to do the work for me. So if someone expresses maybe overconfidence in an idea, right? The first thing I'll do is I'll ask them to justify it. I'll ask them to explain why they feel the way they feel. And then I'm going to probe a little bit harder, and I'm going to keep getting more and more detailed until, because I could be wrong. Maybe they have every right to be confident, or we maybe unveil some things in that conversation where I can say, okay, I love the idea and I love the energy and I love the confidence. And it sounds like where we need to focus, or you need to focus, is this, this, and this. And that came out of me not shutting it down. It came out of me going on the journey with them in that conversation to preemptively try to identify the opportunities that do exist, not just the confidence. It's okay that they're confident. Can they back it up with ideas, strategy, behaviors, actions? That's what I care about. And that does help. The other way is, as a mentor, for me, my style, we have to regularly check in to have real conversations on how we're doing. Not, oh, shoot, I have some feedback, let me give them some feedback. But there is a system in place for us to take a step back and just assess for a moment together. How are we doing? What last week, what worked, what didn't work? What was some what was some information that you heard that you wished you would have leveraged or thought about? You have to give them an opportunity to reflect back so that we can move forward. And I think the reflection process in mentoring is essential. I got to teach them how to fish. I'm not just catching the fish for them.
Yeah, one of the things you said before is about maybe someone doesn't have the financial acumen to run their business or whatever. I know you have some perspective on how do you get the financial acumen to do the numbers to justify what you're doing, especially for people who don't have the business, success. Do you have any thoughts about that? How do I learn how to like do that number crunching, even though I may
Yeah.
not be an accountant or anything else like that?
My dad, when I first started my business 21 years ago after the corporate world, and I look, I have a background in theater and psychology. So like I was not a business person. The first advice my father gave me when I came to him, I said, I'm a little nervous. I don't know anything about accounting or budgeting. Right? The first thing he said was, well, you can hire people that can do that. Right. And although that is actually 100% true, I'm not going to suddenly become an accountant, right? Or a CFO. I'm not going to, but what you need to do is have enough curiosity to understand process and thought behind it. Otherwise, you can't make good decisions. There are times where I will call my accountant and I will say, explain this to me. Rather than say, what would you do? I say, explain this to me. I don't fully understand this, right? And that way, I'm still in the learning seat so I can maybe make a good decision rather than say to someone else, just tell me what to do. There are times I might do that, but that really touches on what you thought about. And I've had the privilege of working with people way smarter than me over my career, especially in financial management and even business modeling and building models for business. Some really brilliant people that I've just learned a tremendous amount from, and I feel more equipped to help to navigate that for someone else. And as a mentor, you should not pretend that you're an expert. I am not a subject matter expert in everything. I am an expert in mentoring, which means I have to take a step back and go, Stephen, I don't know the answer to that, but let's figure out who does, and let's figure out how to get the answers that you need.
When you think back to some mentoring relations you've had, and you say that was an amazing experience for me as a mentor and for them as a mentee, what characterized, besides some of the things you've already said, what characterized that made it so valuable?
The first two things that come to mind, and I'm actually, I could say this probably with most of the people. For me, there's two things. One is connection, the other is results. Connection just for the sake of connection, where we're able to have a lot of trust. I do that well. I help to establish trust with someone fairly quickly, but consistently. But that's not enough. If we have trust and we don't actually help this person produce the results they need, then it's not quite as successful. To me, it's the trust and the connection and the respect and the value that we see, all of those wonderful characteristics of a relationship, but it's also the results that they are able to accomplish. For me, in the work that I do in the world that I live in most, which right now is in that youth services, summer experiences, one of the things that gets in the way the most for people is that they may not be quite as personally organized as they really need to be. They don't know how to manage a project or know how to even manage the amount. Entrepreneurs manage a tremendous amount of work, tremendous. It is one of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur. And it is hard to do that if you don't have good project management skills or personal organizational skills. And I see that getting in the way of really creative, innovative people all the time.
Yeah, let's talk a little about accountability. So is it your job to hold them accountable? And if they don't follow through and don't do what they said they committed to the previous session, how do you handle that?
This is such a loaded question for me. I would say that early in my career, I used to believe it was my job to hold them accountable. And what would happen was I ended up doing all the thinking for a lot of my mentees or clients. I almost, even though I didn't do all the work for them, I felt the ownership of that work, sometimes more than they did. And what I have learned as a coach over my career now is that I have to care so much that they are holding themselves accountable for getting this done. So does that mean I have to sometimes check in and ask? Yes. Does that sometimes mean I have to say, you need a system? You have no systems. How are you tracking this? Yes, of course. But I want, the minute I start tracking it for them, it's not going to help them.
That's great.
And that to me has been my biggest learning over the years as a mentor. They have to be accountable, and they have to want to hold themselves accountable, and I can help them find ways to do that.
Can you give me an example of that? Like,
Sure.
I'm not managing my time well. What should I be doing?
Yeah. Yeah. So we could use managing time. I could give you a lot of examples of this. Often for managing time, it's people will sometimes just gravitate towards the tasks and projects and parts of the excitement of this new thing that they're doing. They gravitate towards what they're good at, and they gravitate towards what they want to do, right? So sometimes that's sales, which is great. You need to gravitate towards sales, but maybe they have no CRM, or there is a CRM, but they're not actually putting the data in. So if you don't put the data in and you don't create that habit for yourself, then you are not able to do that. So a lot of times for time management, the work that I would do with them is we would together try to shop around for an actual system. What's the actual issue, and how are we going to help this person now navigate time, manage time, navigate projects. Sometimes it's a savvy project management system. I'll tell you, that was in the corporate world. I'll tell you, for the work I do, sometimes it's Trello, which is a really simple system that a lot of my camps now use that just help keep all tasks and projects defined and in front of them and on their calendar, and it syncs up all their calendars and their communications. But there are lots of examples, and sometimes it's not so tangible. Sometimes there's a person or a factor that is noise for them, that's an ongoing distraction, and it's my job to name that and help them start navigating that. So the challenge is there's a tough one. My spouse doesn't like how much time I'm spending on this new venture. It's actually, I'm newly married. They didn't sign up for this. And now I'm having a tremendous amount of trouble with this startup, spending the time I need and not have tension with my spouse. Well, I can't be a therapist, but I would be a fool if I didn't start naming and acknowledging the challenges that they're actually facing. Otherwise, they're going to burn themselves out so fast, or possibly just kill the relationship that they have. That I find myself in that dilemma with startup folks all the time, and we have to talk about it.
Yeah. Do you find, obviously you've been doing this for a number of decades, do you find that the generations are different, the way they sort of approach some of these issues in terms of being mentored, or like what a 25-year-old would do versus a 45-year-old?
I hate making generalizations, so I'm going to be really careful here. I will say this. I work with a lot of folks younger than me, in their 20s, and most of them are way more savvy at not just figuring out technology, but actually leveraging technology to solve problems, way more savvy than I am. And I've been exposed to a lot. And so for me, I just want to be able to name that as a strength. So they're so motivated often when you give them something that they can solve that you can't. There's something that happens with my oldest son, who's now a technology consultant. And anytime we are both working on something in our family or whatever, we're going to solve something, he immediately goes to the computer and I immediately figure out, who do I call? And he laughs at me every time. He's like, what do you mean call? I'm like, well, you got to call them. You got to talk. You got to work it out. He's like, no, Dad, I did the same exact thing in 5 minutes on the computer. So I think one of the biggest differences in the generations is the younger generation, they just have such a comfortable relationship with technology. It works the other way too. Many people, and we work with a lot of college students in my organization, the comfort in having face-to-face interactions is in some cases less now, because this generation has grown up with so much technology at their fingertips. So being able to help a new entrepreneur do the interpersonal things, the networking pieces that they need to do, the relationship building pieces that they need to do. Some, not all, but some may not have those skills quite as savvy or as developed as some others. And part of that is just because of the generation they're growing up in.
And now, and we have no idea how long this pandemic is going to last. Any hints on how to do these things virtually versus in person? Have you seen any difference in mentoring now that you're doing more virtual stuff?
Mentoring and coaching virtually, thank goodness, that actually is less affected by like training. I think training is way more difficult now, especially the training that we do, which has so much to do with people skills. I would say that that there are, this doesn't happen to me, but I've heard my colleagues really complain about this, the level of distraction when you're not in the same room as someone is sometimes hard to navigate. I am not currently dealing with that during this pandemic. All the folks that I'm coaching, I think, are really bought in, probably more because of them than me, but it is a reality. There are a lot of distractions that you can have. Just being in front of your computer, I see people in meetings all the time. You can tell by their eyes, they are no longer there. They're chatting or they're doing emails so I think that's something. I also would say any coaching and mentoring, more than anything else, you need a plan. You need to lay out some expectations that help people know, oh, we're speaking this often at this time, whether those are standing calls with standing agendas, which I try to do, which by the way is easier during the pandemic because I'm not traveling. It is so much easier to do a standing call now with people. Whereas before I was like, oh, well, sorry, I'm traveling that day or that week. But all of those, getting a plan in place, whether you're virtual or not, is the key.
So if you have one last question, which is your audience for this video is mentors who are trying to learn how to become mentors. Some of them have been mentors before. Most of them have not been. They're entrepreneurs, they're corporate execs. They have a different way of doing things. Is there any question that I did not ask you that I should have that would give me some information that would provide great value to them?
Yeah, I'll highlight one. I loved the question about accountability because I really think that is a bit of a dance that you need to do. You cannot, at times you will feel more enthusiastic than your mentee, right? Which is okay. But that enthusiasm has to balance with them so that we're not sort of sucking up all the energy out of this project and it becomes about us. I know a lot of mentors who sort of, it's their time, their show. I got to be the smartest person in the room. You don't. You have to ask great questions. You have to help them process. You have to help them reflect. And then you have to see, do you have a system to keeping all this organized? I can't tell you how silly this is, but often during a call, I'll say, are you writing any of that down? Right? Like you seem to be hitting on some really, why don't you write that down? Let's take a moment. Write it down. Put it, where are you going to put it? You can put it in the project plan or you're just writing on a Post-it. So don't, to all of those who, congratulations, you're going to be mentors. That's amazing. Don't feel like you have to be the subject matter expert for everything. You have to work through them so that they can thrive and succeed and learn and be the guide to a process rather than the expert on everything.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point. I mean, sometimes you think you're the expert and you have to be that confident expert, but in reality, your expertise should be in uncovering and inspiring and
Yes.
and getting the evidence that they have as to why they believe what they believe. So
Yes.
I think it's a really good point. Well, Jay, thank you very much for taking the time.
Oh, thank you so
Our
much.
words will be reverberating around the Balkans and getting the word out there to Macedonia. Maybe one day we can get you over there, but thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Stephen. Take care. Thanks for asking.
Thanks, bye-bye.